Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Syrian conflict spilling into Lebanon as renewed clashes erupt in Tripoli. U.S. assassination drone strikes kill 3 in northwestern Pakistan. And Israel asks Egypt to withdraw its tanks from Sinai. Mosaic. World news from the Middle East begins now.
In Lebanon, and specifically in the northern city of Tripoli, clashes erupted between the areas of Bab al-Tabane that opposes the Syrian regime and Jabal Mohsen that supports it, with residents exchanging gunfire and rocket-propelled grenades. This led to the killing of 1 person and injury of 23 others, according to a Lebanese security official. The clashes continued sporadically throughout the night before the Lebanese army restored calm to the city. The Lebanese army said that its members responded to the fire of military weapons that was exchanged between the gunmen and conducted patrols in the neighborhoods of the region to arrest the gunmen and restore normalcy to the area. Joining us from Tripoli over the phone is our correspondent Ilian Chatri. Ilian, how would you describe the situation in Tripoli following the clashes that occurred yesterday between the supporters and opponents of the Syrian regime?
After relative calm this morning, it seems that clashes have made a comeback and were renewed about an hour ago with automatic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades. Sniper fire continued the whole day between the area of Bab al-Tabane and Jabal Mohsen. The preliminary and unofficial death toll rose to 3 with more than 20 injuries. Among them are 9 injured soldiers from the Lebanese army, 4 from yesterday and 5 from today, including an officer after a Lebanese army station was targeted with a bomb, which led to the injury of those 5, including an officer, as mentioned. The Lebanese army issued a statement this morning saying it is conducting military operations, meaning it is raiding the gunmen's areas, and is also conducting an arrest campaign. In addition, it is also directly responding to the clashes to foil them. But this has not prevented a violent renewal of the clashes about an hour ago, as mentioned.
Ilian, is the situation headed more towards containment or an escalation?
In reality, it was not surprising that the clashes resumed between the areas of Bab al-Tabane and Jabal Mohsen because of the many known factors. There is an attempt to contain the situation, but everyone knows that political calls alone are not enough, and that the Lebanese army's intervention is never enough. We need many political calls and a political umbrella so that the Lebanese army can intensify its deployment alongside the security forces until calm is restored. And even this solution cannot guarantee calm will be restored to this area. A drastic political solution is needed.
Ilian Chatri, our correspondent from Tripoli. Thank you.
In Syria, the local coordination committee said that security and military forces killed 72 people in many areas. Most were killed in Damascus and Daraa. Opposition activists reported that the southern city of Daraa came under air and artillery shelling this morning, and that a number of residential neighborhoods were subjected to artillery shelling in the city of Latakia, in the northwestern part of the country. Regime tanks also stormed the Damascus suburb of al-Muadamiyah. Qadri Jamil, the deputy Syrian prime minister, said the resignation of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is not a precondition to the start of negotiations between the parties of the Syrian crisis. He added that all issues can be discussed, including this one. He also indicated that foreign military intervention in Syria is impossible because it will lead to an expansion of the crisis beyond the country's borders. Jamil said the threat made by American President Barack Obama to deploy U.S. forces if Syria were to use chemical weapons is a mere propagandist threat.
The U.S.-European stance on sanctions is hypocritical and greatly harms the Syrian people and the Syrian citizens who are suffering a lot today from these sanctions. And as the Arab proverb says, a friend in need is a friend indeed. We felt that the Russian side and all our other friends, and China and Iran and all the others, we felt they want to help us ease the effects of these sanctions on Syrian citizens.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned Western countries against taking unilateral action on Syria. He confirmed that Russia and China agree that they will not allow any violation of international law and the UN Charter. This comes after American President Barack Obama threatened to wage a U.S. military operation against President Bashar al-Assad if he attempts to use chemical or biological weapons.
International understandings on Syria have hit a dead end after the failure of the Arab League's initiatives, the plan of joint UN Arab League envoy Kofi Annan, and finally the Russian communique in Geneva that was never implemented. And as the delegation of UN observers leaves Damascus, the curtain has been lifted on a fruitless international diplomatic effort whose results were reflected in reports by the intelligence services of the powerful parties involved in the Syrian crisis. However, the verbal attacks between the major international players were the most notable. Recurring Russian warnings against the use of force in Syria outside the framework of the Security Council was expressed by Russian diplomat Sergei Lavrov during his visit to the Finnish capital Helsinki and in Moscow during his meeting with China's State Councilor Dai Bingguo.
Russia and China have reliable standards with which we adopt all our measures. And this is completed through coordinating our foreign policies. These standards are represented through the need to firmly commit to international law and the principles of the UN Charter. We must not allow their violation. So we are adopting these rules, and we believe it is the right path for the current situation.
The shouts of the Russian minister came after American President Barack Obama warned Damascus in an unscheduled press conference against using chemical weapons. He stressed that this would constitute a red line. The statement was reminiscent to statements made by the administration of the former president, George Bush Jr., before invading Iraq. At the time, the administration accused the Iraqi regime of possessing and developing weapons of mass destruction.
The Syrian president, Bashar al-Assad, has lost his legitimacy and must resign. We are monitoring that situation very carefully, and there would be enormous consequences if we start seeing movement on the chemical weapons front or the use of chemical weapons. That's our red line, and that would change my calculations significantly.
International bickering on Syria comes alongside heightened international intelligence work. So, while there are talks that the battles in Aleppo are being run from Russian operation rooms, media outlets circulated photos showing a German spy ship near the Syrian coast, and an unusual workflow in NATO information centers in Cyprus was reported. Alex Ayub, BBC.
U.S. assassination drone strikes continue to claim more lives in Pakistan. This time, 3 people were killed when an unmanned aircraft fired 4 missiles at a house in the northwestern tribal region of North Waziristan. We don't know the identities of the victims yet. The attack is the latest in a rising number of airstrikes by U.S. unmanned aircraft on foreign soil. Washington uses drones for combat and espionage missions in several countries, including Yemen, Somalia and Pakistan. It claims the aircraft target militants, but many of the victims have turned out to be civilians. Well, it's the National Defence Industry Day here in Iran, and the Defence Ministry has unveiled a series of its latest achievements to mark the occasion. President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has inaugurated several important projects, including sophisticated missile and electronic technology, as well as advanced aerial and sea defence batteries. He also toured an exhibition of the latest achievements by the defence industry and the Iranian Aerospace Organization. Tehran has managed to significantly boost its deterrent power in recent years, and it's become self-sufficient in producing a long list of military equipment and systems. Now, embarrassing revelations involving U.S. lawmakers, drinking and nudity. A delegation of about 20 Republican lawmakers and staff on a trip to Israel last summer swam in the Sea of Galilee after a night of dining and drinking. One of the lawmakers, House Representative Kevin Yoder, even went a step further and swam naked in the waters which Christians consider as holy. The Sea of Galilee is where Jesus Christ is said to have walked on water. Yoder has apologized for his actions. Some other members of the delegation have admitted that consuming alcohol may have played a role in the incident. The trip was sponsored by the American Israel Education Foundation, an affiliate of the influential pro-Israel advocacy group AIPAC. Now, a new report reveals there may be an issue of media bias in the U.S., especially when it comes to violent actions against Muslims. Members of the Muslim community may be exposed to violence from the public that's largely underreported by the media, as Press TV's Colin Campbell tells us now.
Through the hundreds of thousands of media images Americans view throughout any given day, there may be a subliminal message about American Muslims that many are not aware of. A recent analysis in Newsweek magazine points out that there are tendencies to report violent acts committed by Muslims and underreport violence against Muslims. The article points out that in August of this year alone, there have been at least 7 separate acts of aggression towards Muslims, from property vandalism to the mass murder that occurred at the Sikh temple in Wisconsin, likely because the perpetrator believed the victims were Muslim even though they weren't. The attack on the temple received national attention, while the other incidents didn't. Experts say it creates a bipolar view of the Muslim culture.
Polar opposite caricatures of Muslims as either potentially dangerous, therefore potentially villains, or Muslims as potentially victims. And it doesn't humanize people at all.
The varied perspective that the media has provided about Muslims being victims and the victimized also has political implications. Conservatives such as Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann of Minnesota and Congressman Charles King of New York, among others, have fed an anti-Muslim narrative. Some experts believe this is what may have led to the FBI using informants to spy on mosques.
The raids here in the United States, all entrapment, sabotage, all of them are justifiable by the government standard.
Analysts say that media tend to pit one group against the other for ratings and for economic gain.
Fear is a great motivator. Fear sells. Fear makes money. Fear makes people into viewers. Fear can make people into consumers.
This trend is becoming similar to the accusations of communism Americans used against each other for political and economic leverage during the Cold War. Analysts say that if the media were less biased about acts committed against Muslims than those committed by Muslims, there would be a better balance within the cultural dynamics of the U.S. However, for some, not enough profit. Colin Campbell, Press TV, Washington.
A senior Israeli source of the Prime Minister's office told our Al Jazeera correspondent that Tel Aviv sent a letter to Cairo via the White House, calling for the immediate withdrawal of the Egyptian army's tanks from Sinai.
Egypt has stepped up its military presence in the region as part of Operation Eagle, aimed at purging armed terrorists following the recent Rafah attack.
Is it a warning sign of a looming crisis between Israel and post-revolution Egypt under the Brotherhood's reign? And will Cairo respond to Tel Aviv's request sent via Washington to withdraw the Egyptian army's tanks from Sinai? Israel considers the deployment of heavy arms for the first time in the region since the Camp David Accords were signed, even if part of a wide-scale cleansing operation of terrorists, as a serious violation of the peace treaty between the two sides, especially considering that Egypt acted with no prior consultation with Israel. The message comes one day after Israel deployed anti-missile system batteries in the city of Erupt in response to the Egyptian army's deployment of anti-aircraft missiles in Sinai. The Israeli diplomatic escalation also comes after the recent visit of the new commander of the Egyptian Armed Forces, General al-Fitr al-Sisi, to the volatile Sinai Peninsula. Al-Sisi is directly overseeing the final plans to step up Operation Eagle that is underway in the area. President Mohammed Morsi said that al-Sisi is personally leading the operation in Sinai. The plan includes the use of military aircrafts and rocket launchers with the aim of purging the area of armed militants. It's undeniable that the killing of the 16 Egyptian soldiers by members of what has become known as the Salafi Jihadist Front in Sinai has placed Egypt in an awkward position. The Egyptian government is obligated to maintain security, which is subject to an escalation at any time. In doing so, Egypt is trying to prevent militants from provoking Israel in a bid to drag it into carrying out a military action in Sinai, and consequently engage in a military confrontation with Egypt. And this is exactly what Cairo and Tel Aviv are trying to avoid, at least for now.
Joining us from Jerusalem is our correspondent, Ilyas Karam. Ilyas, why did Israel take this position, and why now?
Honestly, Israel is facing a real dilemma. On one hand, Israel wants the Egyptian army to continue its military operation in the Sinai Peninsula and purge the area of what Israel is referring to as terror cells. But on the other hand, Israel fears that the Egyptian army will not withdraw its forces from Sinai after completing its operation. Israel fears that the Egyptian army will create a new state of affairs that contradict what was agreed upon in the military provisions of the Camp David peace accords between the two sides. Israel will have no choice but to deal with this new reality on the ground. This may lead to the launch of a new round of negotiations, especially considering that Egypt may demand to renegotiate the military provisions of the Camp David Accords. Israel asked the U.S. administration, or the White House, to mount pressure on the Egyptian army and the political decision-making body in Cairo to ensure the withdrawal of the Egyptian forces after the completion of their military operation. They also want to ensure that Egypt will not deploy any forces or military machinery without consulting Israel first. In the past few weeks, Israel has allowed the Egyptian army to deploy a limited number of tanks and fighter jets. However, it seems that the Egyptian army sent more reinforcements than were permitted by Israel, and this is where Israeli fears and concerns originate.
Insurgents fired rockets into an American base in Afghanistan and damaged the parked plane of visiting chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, Martin Dempsey. The U.S.-led military coalition said the general was safe in his quarters at the time, but had to take another aircraft out of the country. The rocket strike that hit his C-17 military transport plane was yet another propaganda coup for the Taliban after they claimed to have shot down a U.S. helicopter last week. 2 maintenance workers were slightly injured by shrapnel in today's attack. Meles Zenawi, Ethiopia's longtime ruler, who held tight control over his country but was helpful in the immigration of Ethiopian Jewry to Israel, has died suddenly of an undisclosed illness. More on Zenawi and Israel's relations with Ethiopia from IBA's R.A. O'Sullivan.
Meles Zenawi, a hardcore Marxist-Leninist, was just 57 years old when he passed away Monday night from a sudden infection while hospitalized in Belgium. Zenawi had ruled Ethiopia since 1991, vastly improving the economy of Africa's second most populous country and turning Ethiopia, with its powerful military, into a key player in regional security affairs, including highly regarded actions against al-Qaeda groups. He was particularly close to Israel and fostered Ethiopia's special ties with Jerusalem. Zenawi attended the funeral of slain Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, who was a personal friend. It was under Zenawi that Israel was able to get the bulk of Ethiopian Jewry out, when his troops held off capturing Addis Ababa from the communist junta for 2 days, while Operation Solomon airlifted 14,000 Ethiopian Jews to the Promised Land.
Ethiopia and Israel are in the best terms. A lot depends on Israel. Ethiopian on their side, they are very positive. They want to strengthen the relation between Ethiopia and Israel, especially in the economic level.
Zenawi led his country with a strong arm, jailing opponents and curtailing freedom of the media. Zenawi disappeared mysteriously from public sight about 2 months ago, and speculation rose he was suffering from a serious health problem. State media said his deputy prime minister will serve as acting prime minister.
I believe Israel should view Ethiopia as a friendly country, as an ally, as one of the countries that has a love to Israel, a true love to Israel in their heart, and therefore we have to foster the relation, we have to be proactive.
Ambassador Ben Chaim, who recently returned from Addis Ababa, says that Israel and Ethiopia had agreed to conclude the immigration of the remaining Ethiopian Jews by 2013, and he expects this policy to be honored by the new leader.
I don't see in the near future, and we speak about 2013, any reason why the government of Ethiopia will not continue to assist us to do it.
In Bahrain, the February 14th coalition called for mass participation in a march commemorating Jerusalem Day martyr Hussein al-Haddad on the island of Al-Muharraq today.
Bahrain was not filled with joy like past years, but was overcome with sadness as its forgotten revolution mourned the souls of youth in the prime of their lives, youth who were martyred by regime forces. The last victim is 16-year-old martyr Hussein al-Haddad, who was killed during the commemoration of International Jerusalem Day, so he was named the Al-Aqsa Martyr. And based on calls by the opposition, citizens boycotted commercial malls and markets that remained nearly empty, as traffic on main roads was limited and visits to the martyrs' graves increased in a display of their loyalty to them. The regime's gift to the Bahrainis that was represented through the killing of martyr al-Haddad on Eid al-Fitr, which Bahraini religious scholar Sheikh Isa Qasim thanked the authorities for, was not the first. Last year, and also on Eid, the regime killed a young boy, Ali Jawad al-Sheikh, by running him over. And on his anniversary, the neighborhoods of al-Kharajiyah on the island of Sitra and the town al-Duraz witnessed mass marches. In solidarity with the family of Ali Jawad al-Sheikh on the island of Sitra, the February 14th coalition confirmed its determination to receive retribution from the murderers, regardless of how long it takes, and called for national unity and for not allowing the regime to divide the people by sowing sectarian strife.
We have the right to retribution from those who killed martyrs Ali al-Sheikh and Hussam al-Haddad, and all the martyrs. We will not compromise on their rights, neither us nor the parents of the martyrs, no matter how long it takes. We confirm the need for national unity, and we will not allow the Khalifa enemy to divide us and to implant sectarian strife in our beloved country.
The revolutionaries' action continued through the night, as nighttime demonstrations were held in most areas under the banner Freedom Offerings, during which protesters chanted for the downfall of the regime and for retribution from the murderers. The Bahraini regime turned the squares of the cities and towns into military sites to crack down on unarmed citizens. It drowned their homes with poisonous gas and pellet bullets, which led to a number of injuries among the participants in the peaceful protests.
It seems that modern technology continues to penetrate our traditional social fabric, and while technology can be helpful in some instances, it can't replace real connections under any circumstances. Karima Nashmat reports.
The month of bounties and blessings is gone, and other blessed days will come. The blessed Eid al-Fitr crowns the highest image of social solidarity and strengthens kinship between all Algerians. But with the development of technology, some of us are limiting our social ties to phone calls or text messages while sending wishes over the internet through social networking sites.
I'm against this because affection can't be expressed. Where's the affection? There's no emotion in sending a text message to wish others a happy holiday.
It's different when you go into someone's home and see what they need. We need this kind of kinship, and this is what the Prophet, peace be upon him, called for.
It is a positive thing on one hand, so people are not disconnected. But on the other, real connections between one another should also continue.
Even if opinions vary between being in favor of electronic blessings, as some have called it, and resenting them, no one can disagree that technology has succeeded in overcoming time and place, but sometimes at the expense of real ties, affection, and a warm family and social environment. After all, Eid is a chance to maintain our kinship and our connection to God.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.